Leads are critical. And if you're currently keeping track of your leads using spreadsheets, sticky notes, or even just your memory, there's a good chance you're missing the mark. That's why I want to show you a way to keep track of your leads, your pipelines, your opportunities, even your onboarding process, using something that is built into all of your other systems that can be part automation, part manual, and you can customize it. Pipelines have a massive impact on businesses of any size, from a clearer sales process to better sales follow-up, less lost leads, better team visibility, and way more useful reporting right at your fingertips. I have talked to many business owners over the years that usually at best have a spreadsheet of the opportunities, the people that they're interested in speaking with, and that's a lot of times where it starts. My business coach told me I need to have a pipeline. I need to have a list of my top prospects. And so they make that list and they work that list for maybe a couple of months. Now, if the business owner or the person that's in charge of this has a strong sales background, they're more likely to succeed at this stage because they understand the value of that pipeline that translates to actual dollars brought in over time. And that always be selling mentality is walking people through that pipeline. But that's not every business owner. Most business owners, they get into business because they actually like the work that they're doing, not so much the selling. This is where having a system in place becomes pretty critical, because the less you have to do manually, the more that happens just because someone took natural steps within your system, within your sales and marketing system, the more likely you are to succeed at this part of the process. More often than not, pipelines and CRMs fall by the wayside within a few months, until now. What I want to show you is how you can set this up in a way that won't fall by the wayside in a couple months. Even if you take a break from looking at it, when you come back, it will have stayed updated. All you will have to do is review the data that's in there. And at any point, you can look at a report to see what is in your pipeline, and it will make sense. Let's talk a bit about what I mean by a pipeline. A pipeline can be any sort of process that you walk somebody through. Often with small to medium-sized service businesses, which is who we often help, what that looks like is a lead comes in through the website. Maybe it's the contact form, maybe it's a lead magnet. And then that information goes to a manager or a salesperson or possibly even the owner. That is step one. New lead comes in. Step two would be that person is contacted in some way. It could be that someone's actually picking up the phone and calling them. It could be an email is being sent manually. Or it could be that an automation kicks off and maybe there's a sequence of emails that's automatically going out and you're tracking what sort of actions they took. This is that next stage in the pipeline. And you need to be able to lay out the stages in your prospecting or lead generation. What does somebody go through when they come into your ecosystem or their name comes across your screen? For some people, they have this prospecting list of people that they're interested before they even come into contact with them. Like, these are our top 10 prospects that we want to engage with. And so it starts before they filled out a form. That's what I call a prospect. A lead for me is when somebody actually fills out the form or engages with us in some way. And then there could be some sort of qualification process there. Not all leads are equal. We do have a lead scoring process that we build into our system where we can see how engaged is someone, and it gamifies this process. And we can move them through a system, through a pipeline, by how much engagement they have. And we don't take a ton of interest in someone until they hit a certain engagement level. That's another way to look at a pipeline. All of this can be connected and automated together if you're using the right system. Then there's the process of, okay, they booked an appointment. What does that mean for you? Is that another stage in the lead prospecting? They're not really a customer yet. You haven't sent them a proposal. Is a proposal part of your process, or do you go into contracting and invoicing? And that's where you have to lay all of these factors out. And you really have to think about that customer journey from the time that you become aware of them or they become aware of you, all the way through booking the appointment, possibly sending a proposal or a contract or an invoice. And what does that process look like? So that is maybe the lead process and the sales process. And those could be separate or intertwined. And you could have a point where someone converts from the lead pipeline to the sales. And furthermore, you could have another stage where someone becomes onboarding as a new customer. That could be its own process. Once somebody says, yes, I want to become a customer, or once they've signed your contract, or once they've paid your invoice, There's now 3, 4, 5, 10 different steps that have to happen. Maybe it's an onboarding meeting. Maybe it's shared folders and files that have to be swapped. Maybe you need an intake form from them. All of that can be identified in an onboarding process. I think anything that can create a streamlined process could be laid out as a pipeline and therefore connected with automations within our sales and marketing system. Next, I want to actually take a look at what those pipelines would look like if they were not in something like Excel that you were just going to forget about in 2 to 3 months, or something that is not shareable or not visible to everybody in the company. And the system that we like to use is called HighLevel or GoHighLevel. And the reason we like this system is because it's not only pipelines, sales pipelines, lead pipelines, it's also your CRM, it's your email marketing, it's your text message marketing, it's also your appointment booking. So this is where you can make that automation work for you. Instead of having to take the time to go into your spreadsheet and say, yep, this person booked a meeting, or this person opened an email, or this person filled out a form, the system knows that they did it. And when they take those actions, they can automatically be moved to the next stage. Or vice versa. If you really love working in pipelines, it's the way your brain thinks, it's how your team communicates, you can do the opposite. When you move someone to a certain stage in the pipeline, they're automatically sent the welcome email, or they're automatically sent a follow-up email. Those manual steps of moving someone through the pipeline triggers other actions you no longer have to take on your own. And of course, there's always times where you're going to want to take manual actions. Maybe there's a qualifying process that has to be done by a human. You can have that process in there so that when somebody lands on the needs review column in your pipeline, an internal email gets triggered that has all the information and asks the right person to review the details, gives them everything they need or links to everything that they need. They can review it and then they can go manually move the person to approved or denied, and who knows what that can trigger from there. That's the beauty of the all-in-one system, and that's why I really like it. Prior to working with this type of all-in-one system was when we saw everybody have CRMs and pipelines go by the wayside within a couple months. Now we see them using them. Not to mention, all of that data rolls up into reports that can be viewed anytime. They're live, real-time reports, as well as sent out monthly with all the data you need to know. How much money do we have sitting in the lead pipeline? At what stage? How long has somebody been sitting in the needs and email column? All of that stuff can be easily visible now and kept up to date. So let's dive in, take a look what these pipelines actually look like, because they're nowhere near as scary as you might think. If you can operate a spreadsheet, this will actually be way easier. Here we are inside of HighLevel, or better yet, our version called Marketex Engine. The reason we have our own version is that we're able to build things like what you're seeing here, and this is a demo account, so you're going to see lots of zeros. We're able to pre-build dashboards that we recommend for our clients. We're able to pre-build pipelines that we recommend for our clients, as well as the automations that connect them all together, different smart lists. We can pre-build all the stuff on top of the HighLevel platform. So if you watch any of our previous videos and you think the things that we're doing would be useful in your business, then you may want to look into joining Marketex Engine instead of HighLevel directly, or at least using our affiliate link, where you will then get some of our templates and you will actually get access to our migration plans and all of those things. So I'm landing on the dashboard, as I mentioned. And the reason I wanted to actually land here is this is often where you come into HighLevel, is on your dashboards. And so many people blow by these. And I have a whole video on dashboards and a separate one on reporting, because I think they are so important if you can get them right. If you know what you're looking for, the data and information that you need on a regular basis, these are invaluable and definitely not something to be ignored. You can build multiple dashboards. The first dashboard we'd actually looked at was focused on opportunities or pipelines. When you're in HighLevel, I've always called them pipelines. Here on the side, they call them opportunities. Opportunities is where you're going to find your pipelines. I use pipelines for things other than leads and prospects, so I think of them beyond just opportunities. But within the pipelines, you can have multiple options. I've got some examples: a lead gen for prospecting, a sales pipeline, a marketing pipeline, as well as an onboarding pipeline, and then a different type of prospecting pipeline. As I'm going through this, I'm going to give you some case studies, some examples, show you some different automations you can do. But at the end, I'm also going to go over some things to be careful of, things to avoid, as well as where you might want to make sure you stick with manual processes. So stick around as I walk through these how-tos and what to and not to do. Right now, we are on an example of a prospecting pipeline. And we can call these anything you want. You can customize this to your customer journey. And that's why it's important to map that out before you start doing this process. You could start with a template, and maybe you do it a couple times and you realize, oh, we never use stage 3. Stage 3 doesn't apply to us. So fix it, take it out, clean it up. No reason to keep things that you're not using. But if you can actually map out your specific process, you're going to use your pipelines a whole lot more because they'll be very applicable to you. In this example, people come into the system as a cold contact. Now, we could have an automation on the back end that's saying anyone that fills out any one of these forms, put them in this pipeline automatically. Or we could have it be a manual process where we add people as an opportunity to this pipeline. And maybe that kicks off an automation. Once they come into the prospecting pipeline, we send them a welcome message. So it's your choice how you want to kick that off. I tend to lean toward the first stage of a pipeline being automatic so that you don't miss anybody. Even if you have to create sort of a stage 0 that didn't exist before, helps make sure that you don't miss anyone. So my first recommendation would be to have an entry point that is automatic. Either when somebody comes into the system, when somebody hits a certain level, maybe in your engagement scoring. I have a whole separate video on engagement scoring, as well as video view scoring and several other things that the system can do that you could actually work into your pipelines. So stage 1, cold contact, cold lead, brand new prospect, or whatever you want to call it, put them in here automatically. In this particular case, you'll notice that it is talking about lead scoring. And so if you have lead scoring turned on, people are going to get points for everything that they do in the system, whether that be open an email, click an email, book an appointment, go to a landing page, fill out a form. All these things are going to give them points, and you have full control over the number of points. Then you could start to determine, what does it look like when someone hits warm, hot, boiling? What does that look like? You can set those numbers, and through automations, have people automatically go into those stages. And then you could set up an automation that anytime someone lands in the hot lead score column, someone gets an email saying, you have a new hot lead. You should reach out to this person. That is one way to use the combination of lead scoring and your pipelines to know who's in your system, what kind of leads you have. And there's no manual effort. You could completely ignore those emails if you want to. If you ignore too many of them, I would probably turn the system off or rethink how you're using it. This is low-hanging fruit that I think everyone using HighLevel, everyone using an all-in-one system should be using. Lead scoring and a pipeline to help identify hot leads, people opening every email and taking actions. You also want to make sure you have automations set up that will remove anyone from your pipeline that has unsubscribed or that you suspect is an email bot. Also make sure that they're taken out if they actually become a customer. You don't want to have false leads in your pipeline. But again, if you go with our templates, all of this is already set up for you. You just have to customize it with the numbers that you want and the messages that you want to see. That's a version of a prospecting pipeline. Next up, we have a sales pipeline. This will probably look pretty familiar to anybody who's ever done any pipeline work. A lot of times you have a new prospect comes in. Again, identify how they're coming in there. Then you have first outreach, second outreach, third outreach. Now, these could be an email, these could be a phone call, these could be any of the above. And this is where you would have to decide, are we going to track that saying, yes, somebody on our team reached out to them the first time, the second time, the third time? Or if you're using the system to send your emails and make your phone calls, you could automate this. When a phone call is made, move them to the next stage. When an email is sent, move them to the next stage. And that could actually be automatically tracked. So once you have a new lead, another thing that is very common in this whole sales pipeline or prospecting pipeline is to get a consultation booked. Another thing that you want is consultation attended, contract sent, contract signed. These are all pretty typical stages. A lot of this can be automated. If you're using an all-in-one system like this, the system's going to know when they booked an appointment. And all you have to do is say when somebody books an appointment, move them to this stage in the pipeline. When they attend, you may manually have to move them there to say that they attended. Certainly, if you label them as a no-show or a canceled, the system will know and it will not move them to the attended section. You could have it move them automatically as long as they're not labeled as a no-show. So you could automate that. Contract sent. Well, guess what? This system has the ability to send proposals and contracts and collect signatures. So you could automate this whole piece too. You could know when the contract has been sent, they can automatically be moved. Or when you move them to contract sent, it's automatically sent. You don't have to manually send the contract if they're all the same. Then you have contracts signed. When they've signed that contract, they can automatically be moved in the pipeline to the next stage. And all of these stages roll up to your dashboards. So at any time, you will be able to see the contract sent stage of our pipeline is currently holding $5,000 worth of business. What can we do to move that needle? And that's the important part of the conversation. I mean, the organization is great, right? Having all this laid out, knowing exactly where people are, having anybody in your company be able to come in here and say, oh, look, we booked X number of consultations. We've sent this many contracts. Absolutely wonderful. But when people get stalled in a certain stage, you do not want that to fall through the cracks, especially when they're in this end of the pipeline. When they're in this end, that is leaving money on the table. The good news is there are more automations that you can turn on here. When somebody is sitting in a particular stage for too long, you're going to get a message. Somebody's been sitting in the contract sent stage for 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, whatever it is, you set the number. You're going to get an alert where somebody on your team is. And you're going to know that they've been there too long. That is so valuable. That right there is amazing. Okay. So you don't have to think about it. Your brain power can go to thinking up new ideas and finding new leads. You don't have to constantly be worried about, oh, what emails did I send? Did I flag that? Did I do this? It's actually in here. You know where it is. If you build it right, if you put it all in one. I'm interrupting this video to make sure that there is no confusion about HighLevel or about how to work with me. If you want to try HighLevel but don't want to waste months trying to figure it out, I have 2 very clear options for you to consider. If you're looking to build an agency or a SaaS business, head over to marketex.com/HighLevel. By using our affiliate link, which costs you nothing, you will get the following bonuses. Our Marketex Engine Core Snapshot. This is all of the features that we install in every new Marketex Engine user account, and we're giving it to you for free as an affiliate. Our onboarding guides and access to our private community, an invitation to join our weekly live office hours, where I personally will answer questions and even share tips that I've learned throughout the week. And I'm constantly learning. There is so many new features and things to learn in this industry as a whole, not to mention within the HighLevel platform. Plus, we'll give you our additional templates, checklists, and migration guide. That's option number 1. Option 2 is if you are a business owner just looking to improve your own tech stack and you don't want to do it alone. You would like a trusted strategic partner in your corner that speaks the language, brings you time-tested automations, proven strategies, and up-to-date learning. Then go to marketexengine.com and book a consultation with me to learn more about our high-level agency, Marketex Engine, and joining our ecosystem. I'm also currently offering discounts on one-on-one consulting to any of our affiliates and HighLevel users. So whether you're building an agency or building a business, pick your path and let's drive results. Now, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Let's move on to some of the other ideas. Here we have another example of a pipeline, just different wording. So here you have a new lead. They're finally a hot lead. They're a new booking. They attended or visited a location. Then maybe they made a sale. It's just different language, same concept. Somebody moving through the system. And on this one, you can see here what it looks like when you have an opportunity card here in the field and how you can click on it, see the information. It brings you right to the contact screen for this particular contact. If I go back, it's going to bring me back to my pipeline. I can drag and drop this very easily. That's what it looks like to manually move somebody through the pipeline. I can move them all the way around. I can see what tags they have, what the value is. And here you can see what it looks like when I have a $100 value in my sales pipeline or a $100 value in my hot lead pipeline. You can assign a particular person. And this is what it just looks like. You would have a whole list of people. If you had 2 people in the same pipeline, very visual, very easy to manipulate, very easy to move, very easy to add details to. You would be able to see here if someone had already booked an appointment. The appointment would be listed right here. The onboarding pipeline is a little bit different. This is why I was saying I tend to think about pipelines beyond just opportunities. I think of them as any process that I walk people through. When we have a new client, we have processes that we walk them through. There's an onboarding welcome message, and then there's a meeting, and there's data collection, and there's internal discovery. All of that is stuff that has to happen with every single person, and we have to set up our project management system. Some of it can be automated and triggered by them signing the contract, and other things maybe we need or want to do manually. This is what an onboarding pipeline can help you with. You could know where every client is in the stage of the process. And just like in the sales process, you can be alerted if somebody stalls. The last thing you want to do is have somebody have just signed on as a new client, given you money and trust, and then get stalled out in the onboarding process. You do not want to forget about them. And maybe it's two different teams, a sales team and a delivery team, and you need to make sure they're on the same page. This is where you can have that visual look of exactly where people are going through that process. And you can add as many different stages in your pipelines as you need to. Let's take a look at that really quick in terms of how to actually set up pipelines in HighLevel. We were here in the opportunities section. Now we're going to go to the pipeline section, and this is where you're going to see the pipelines that we have set up. You're going to see how many stages are in each one, when they were last updated. If I go to the three little dots on the end, you're going to see some options I have to edit, duplicate. In my case, because I'm an agency, I can copy to another sub account. Then that's part of what we do. When we create something really cool, we share it with everyone. You can manage permissions, and that's pretty important too. When you create a pipeline, you want to control who has the ability to see that pipeline or interact with that pipeline. And so if I look at this manage permissions for a minute, you'll actually see who I'm sharing it with, select users, and excluding specific users. And then you can see within that, can everybody view only? Are they able to edit, or do they have no access at all? This is pretty important, especially if you have sales teams, different people responsible for different pipelines. You may or may not want them to have visibility into each other's pipelines or different departments. This could be even a privacy issue in some cases. And you do have a copy link so that you can quickly share that with people. That's how it looks on the back end. We'll go into edit real quick. When you come into edit, you can see that we have the different stages laid out. We could reorganize them. We can add a new stage. We can also choose whether these show up in reports or not. If there was a reason you didn't want something to show up in a report, maybe you don't want a whole pipeline to show up in a report, you have full control over that. You can delete stages if you decide you no longer need certain stages. And one of the couple other things that are newer that I really like is, one, you now have some color control, which does really help visibility, especially when you're looking at stages like this. One of the other things I really like is these smart tags. I've talked a lot about how you can create automations to do almost anything you want to. These smart tags are like mini automations that help give you a little bit of visibility when you're just looking at the overall pipeline. As you can see right here, I have one smart tag turned on right now for a new lead label. And it tells you right here what the description is. Create date is less than or equal to 3 days ago. This lead was just created 3 days ago or less. It's going to have this blue new lead label on it. I can even visually see right here with a little preview of what that will look like. See the new lead label right there. Now, there's lots of things you can do with these smart tags, and you could edit this. You could change it to be 5 days. You could change it to be 10 days. You could change it to be 1 day, whatever you want. But if we look at the other smart tags, you can create your own. Almost anything you can think of, you could set up as a filter in here to create a smart tag. But there's also some pre-built ones. The new lead is the one that I already set up, but let's look at the high value one for just a minute for demonstration purposes. It's called high value. It's when a deal is greater than $10,000, and it's going to be a green label instead of blue. And you can see here that I'm on the details right now. The details are all pre-filled for me because I chose a pre-built tag. If I hit next, it's going to tell me what the rule is that controls that. I could say anything I wanted in the words, but this is the actual filtering, the actual rules that control this. And this is opportunity value is greater than 10,000. Now I could add to this. I could say it's greater than 10,000 and they have XYZ tag, or they have a lead score above such and such. I could do any other rules I wanted to around this. In this case, I am just going to save. And actually, one thing I'm going to go back real quick because something else I wanted to show you was you can apply this to all of your pipelines or just this one. You could have different rules, different smart tags on different pipelines, or you could have them all be matching. I typically lean toward the all matching, but I could definitely see some use cases where that's not true. I'm going to do the apply to all. I'm going to go back to my rule and click save, and you will see this now show up in my smart tags. Smart tags can be powerful. They are newer. Not sure everybody's utilizing them yet, but I am loving them. Now, I will briefly show you some of the automations that I've been talking about, although I do have several other videos that I will link to at the end of this one where you can dig a little deeper and see what we do for existing clients. I have a whole video on actual process for existing clients because we do send our contracts and we do actually use this process. I'll link to that at the end. If we go on the left-hand side here over to automation, this is where you're going to find workflows. And with workflows, there are so many powerful things you can do within the system, from notifications, email marketing, lead magnet distribution, nurture and follow-up, appointment information. You've got affiliate workflows. This is the lead scoring piece that I was talking about here. And you can see here, if there's a dormant prospect, we have a workflow for that. If they're a hot lead, a warm lead, if they are a bot, or D&D stands for do not disturb. So that would be opt out. All of these notifications pre-built. Let's take a quick look maybe just at the hot prospecting, just to give you an overview and an example here. In this example, we're saying a hot prospect was someone with an engagement score or a lead score over 26. And you can see how that's built. That's the trigger. The score is greater than 26. You can set this number to anything you want. You could say 126, right? And I'll save that. Then we are removing them from a couple other workflows because they no longer apply once they become a hot prospect. And this is where you kind of have to think through your processes when you're building workflows. The next stage that we identified through trial and error, and this is why having pre-built workflows is useful, is that we've already gone through these processes. But we have discovered that whenever we're doing something with leads and prospecting, the first thing we want to do is make sure we've excluded current clients and customers. So we have a way to identify them and exclude them. The next thing we do, because we often find we ourselves get tagged in our own hot prospects, because of course we're clicking on all of our own stuff. So we want to exclude the team. We have identified a way to exclude team members. And then we have what's left is all the hot prospects that are not clients and not team members. Right here, you could also exclude do not disturb, email bots, those types of things, but we actually have a separate workflow for that. And that's why we don't here. Okay. So we've got the non-clients. Now, anybody who comes through either one of these, we make sure they have all the right tags and all the right fields. Then for those people that legitimately come through and they're top prospects, we make sure they're in the right pipeline. That's what this is doing. We select the pipeline, and let's see if I can pick one that actually has the right stages here. Oh, we'll go with lead gen, and there we go, hot lead. And what do we want them to look like in the pipeline? What information do we want to pull in the pipeline? We want their name, their title, and their company name as well. So these are the fields that we're putting in. We could put in the source if we wanted to. We could enter a value here. If a lot of our clients come through with similar prospecting, we may be able to put in a value here, or even just a default value. Like we know baseline, every lead that comes through is going to be worth $1,000 or $2,500. And then you could adjust it as needed down the road. Then it's going to be open and allowed to move within. We bring them into that hot prospecting pipeline. The goal was to get them to book an appointment. And so then they are removed from the prospecting pipeline because we're entering them into the sales pipeline at that point. And that's why I'm saying you want to know your process and identify your language. And you can see here, they're getting added to the sales pipeline. And we'll say sales pipeline consultation booked. That's what a workflow looks like. And that's what kind of control you have over deciding your triggers and deciding your actions. You can adjust things as you go. I'm going to save my changes there. The other thing that is nice is even if you don't know 100% what you're doing with building workflows, in HighLevel, there is workflow AI. So you can actually have AI help you too. I have this idea. I want my workflow to do XYZ. And it will help you build out that workflow. It'll get you started. It'll show you the actions that are available. It'll give you some ideas. All right, you all know I am a huge fan of automation tech, but I promised I would also tell you when not to automate, as well as some common mistakes to avoid when implementing these processes. So let's get started on the pitfalls. I already alluded to a couple of the things to avoid, and that is when a qualifying decision really needs a human eye. Make sure that you have some sort of internal notification that this is at the qualifying stage and it needs a review. And set yourself a reminder. If this person is still in this stage 3 days later, send another email. Do not let people get lost in these stages simply because follow-up did not happen, or simply because reminders did not get sent. That is such an easy thing to fix. Do not automate when a qualification review needs to happen. The next thing that sometimes cannot be automated is the proposal being sent, because a lot of times proposals have to be customized. It has to do with the conversation you had with the client. It has to do with specific terms and those types of things. I know at least that's what mine are. And so while I do have proposal and contract templates, there are parts of those that have to be customized. That is one of those things that I do not automate. That is something that I do one-off for each person. However, when that gets sent, they do get moved in the pipeline automatically. And when that gets signed, they get moved again in the pipeline automatically. Even though there's a manual step there to create the proposal and click the send button, it is a automatic step to keep them updated in that pipeline. The next one would be a bad fit. You should have some sort of indicator in your system, and it's like a qualifying indicator, but some sort of indicator when somebody is a bad fit. And you should have a way to identify that. And even if it's a little bit systematized, like the way that they fill out a form question, you should still have a manual review of that. I would hate to see a situation where somebody answered the question wrong or misunderstood it. I would always have a manual review at that point. So that would be item number 3, to not fully automate. Item number 4 would be the stalled deal. Now, this is another one where I think you can automate the notification of this, but I think there should be some sort of manual review cleanup process that says this deal has stalled. Is it legitimate? Is it not legitimate? Do we need to put in more effort? Are they no longer interested and we should take them off the pipeline? I think it needs a review, but you can set automated reminders so that someone can do that review. And the final one that I would say do not automate is the strategic follow-up. Similar to the proposal or the contract, where you need to send a follow-up message to someone that you had a conversation with, and it has to include details about that meeting. It has to include the strategy. Could you maybe help AI summarize the meeting? Could you use your AI summary or the notes from that meeting? 100%. You can make your job easier, but it still needs to be a human sending these follow-ups. Very rarely do I completely automate meeting follow-ups. Now, if your meeting process is so systematized that the follow-up is exactly the same every time, then you can prove me wrong here, and you can probably make that a follow-up message, a blanket statement, and you know exactly the next process that they're going to follow. For me, I cannot necessarily automate those. I do have to send a unique follow-up to each person. However, the reminder to send the follow-up can 100% be a task on my to-do list, something that I checked off and said I'm done, and then they get moved to the next stage in the pipeline. Now we're going to talk about the pitfalls, the places where I see people failing when they build pipelines. This would be having too many steps, getting too granular with every little thing you incorporate with a new deal or a prospect or a lead. It can't be, I looked at the email and then I replied to the email. That's too much. People do the same thing when they're project managing, where they will granularize every single thing you do in a project. On the flip side of that, being too vague and not being detailed enough where somebody else can't come in and look at your pipeline and understand, oh, you sent email 1, you sent email 2. The next thing I should do is send email 3 or a follow-up call as the third point of contact. Your pipelines need to be so clear that somebody could come in, know exactly what needs to happen next, what has already happened, and be able to follow up on that lead, that contact, or that deal. That's the purpose of a pipeline. It should be really accurate with good notes. Even for yourself, when you get busy, how likely is it that you're going to remember it's been 3.5 days since I sent the last email to that person? Or are you going to have to go spend 10 minutes looking through your inbox to figure that out? Part of what you're doing here, even as a small business owner, is setting yourself up for success so that you can do things faster. And that's where these systems come into play. If you build them now, they're going to scale with you. They're going to grow with your business, and you're going to be ready to take on team members. You're going to be ready to hire a salesperson because you already have this laid out. and you've worked it. You know that it works. You know that these systems are in place and you don't have to wonder and build something from scratch because you brought a new person into the team. All right, pitfall number 3, because the first one was too many stages and the second one was too vague. Pitfall number 3 is combining too many pipelines, having different deals within pipelines. I gave the example of having the lead pipeline and then the onboarding pipeline as separate, maybe a sales pipeline in between, and this will be unique to you, but I see it as 3 different pipelines. Now, if you have drastically different offers, you may need different pipelines for each offer because they may have different stages depending on the size of the company. Maybe it's the person coming in determines what type of pipeline they need, or maybe it is the offer that they're going for. That's something for you to determine, is to make sure that your pipelines are set up appropriately for exactly what's happening. That could mean multiple lead pipelines, multiple sales pipelines, and maybe even multiple onboarding style pipelines. Mistake number 4 is never cleaning up those dead leads. And I've talked about how you can automate that. The stale leads, if they're there too long, you can get notices. You can actually have the system automatically delete them as well. I sort of leave that as a last resort. Maybe somebody's been in the pipeline on the same stage with 0 progress for like 90 days. You've been notified multiple times, or your salesperson's been notified multiple times. You finally delete them from the pipeline and have them start over. But you don't want to leave people there forever. This is the way your pipelines can actually work for you, even if you do kind of disappear and stop looking at them for a month. This is how they can still work for you, is because they actually stay up to date. And if you can come in and clean them up once a month, it will be a big benefit. So mistake number 5 when dealing with pipelines is not having the entry and the exit rules. As I mentioned, I would set it up so that you have an entry place where almost all new leads and prospects come in automatically. It's not something that manually has to be done. If they show up in the CRM, they show up on stage 0 or stage 1 of X pipeline. I would have that in place so that no one ever gets missed. That's like a stable entry point. Then there's the exit point, and there should be an exit point for every single pipeline. If it's a lead pipeline, the exit point is when they become a sales. They leave the lead pipeline and they enter the sales pipeline. From sales, if they become an actual customer or client, then maybe it's the onboarding pipeline. They leave the sales pipeline because they've converted and they're now onboarding. Even the onboarding pipeline, that could maybe be a little bit vague, but it's once whatever onboarding process is done, maybe there's a second discovery call or something like that. That's when they actually leave the onboarding pipeline. Maybe there's a 4th nurture pipeline where you check in with them once a month and they move into, okay, now they're in month 3, month 4. Maybe it's a 12-month nurture pipeline. I see nothing wrong with that, but it continues to move them through the process. They've never sat in any stage of any pipeline for more than 30 days. I think that's important. All right. Number 6, as far as my mistakes, ties some of these pieces together. And this is actually using your pipelines. If you don't use them, then what are they? They're just a decoration, just a vanity metric. If you're not actually using them and improving them consistently, you cannot make improvements if you're not using them. You will not know what's working and what's not working if you're not actively working them. So actually use them, keep them up to date. Go check on your dashboards and say, does that make sense? If not, why? And this may take a couple of months to iron these things out because you have to have people work through them and move through these pipelines to see where the errors and issues are. But that's important. If you're not doing those steps, if you're not checking in on them, they were a waste of time. Don't even bother. They are no better than your spreadsheets or your sticky notes. And I guarantee you that if you put the work in, they will be 10 times better than your spreadsheets and your sticky notes. They will be worth it. But you got to put a little bit of effort in, especially on the front end. All right. And the final failure point that I often see with pipelines, building and setting up pipelines, is simply letting them live in a silo. It's avoiding doing all the stuff I've been talking about with the automations, not connecting your calendars, not connecting your forms, not connecting these automation points, not creating notifications for yourselves or tags for yourselves, not creating all these details that make your pipelines work for you instead of you working for your pipelines. And you do need an all-in-one system to make this work properly, to not make you feel like you're just spending your time keeping something updated, that it's actually working and making your life and your business better. When you can go in and look at your sales pipeline, know exactly how long somebody's been there, what the value is, what kind of business you're bringing in, this is huge, but it doesn't work without setting it up and reviewing it. So I hope all of this insight, these use cases, the variabilities that I've shared with you today, as well as the platform and the program and the automation capabilities, I hope that this helps you see how much better pipelines can be and how valuable they really can be for businesses with better visibility, better conversions, way less missed leads, and just the more you can convert those stale leads, those are people that are already in the system. This is where these platforms shine. And again, they will scale with you. They will grow with you. As you build your team, you will not have to recreate the wheel and re-envision the way you do all of your lead generation and onboarding and sales calls. It will already be built. There is a lot of value in that. If this was helpful, I hope you will subscribe to the channel. And if you have any specific use cases, questions, inquiries, leave me a comment below. If I get 100 likes on any video on the channel, I have promised to do a live webinar on that specific topic. So if this is something of interest to you, make sure you hit that like button and share it. Let somebody else know that you think this would be helpful for. All right, thanks.